It is cold and wet this week, and today the rain is very, very heavy, so I'm taking shelter in my greenhouse. But I think the topic is quite relevant for this week. We're going to talk about what plants you can put in your garden that are adapted to still look lush and green in the cold winter months. I'm going to try and include plants that I don't speak about frequently on this channel, but they're still really good plants. And if your ground isn't frozen, you can still plant them at this time of year, because we're going to dig deeper into the plant science behind what leaf adaptations these plants have to enable them to survive such extremes of cold temperatures. Now, the first thing I'm going to say is that my garden is USDA Gardening Zone 9A. I'm in the south of the UK and I'm on the coast, so it's quite mild. I can push the boundaries a little bit more perhaps than other people. But many of the plants I'm going to talk about in this list do come from places that experience snow, and many of them experience really, really cold winters. So hopefully this list isn't just appropriate for me and in my gardening zone, it's going to be really helpful for you as well. So number one on my list of hardy, evergreen tropical style plants is one that is actually quite popular. It's Acacia dilbata. Now, this fast growing tree originates from Australia, southeastern Australia. And I know when you think of Australia, you think of warm, basking sunshine. How is this going to be hardy? Well, it originates from mountainous regions, which means it's evolved at high altitudes where there are extremes of temperature and sometimes even snow. So this tree can tolerate temperatures down to -8 degrees Celsius. And for me, I think this acacia doesn't look like it should be evergreen because it's got really soft, ferny foliage. It's kind of a bluey green colour. And a massive added bonus is it flowers in spring. And when this plant flowers, it's such a surprise to see these clouds of yellow pom-pom-like flowers covering the canopy in late spring, when so many other things are looking really sorry for themselves. So I think that's why I would encourage you to grow Acacia dilbata. Now, it is fast growing, but it can be pruned to keep it to a sensible size, and you can even grow it in a container, a large container, if you give it plenty of water in summer and just a regular feed in the growing season to encourage healthy growth. So number two on my list of evergreen tropical style plants that can survive cold temperatures is a close relative of something that we see planted a lot in places like supermarket car parks. Now, it's Aucuba omianensis. You're thinking Aucuba, is that not that spotty laurel that you see everywhere with the green leaves and the really bright yellow spotted foliage? Yeah, it is a relative of it, but this is a much more attractive species. Now, Aucuba omianensis, its species name alludes to where it originates from. That's Mount Ome in China, as well as areas of Sichuan. It has these lovely, big, glossy evergreen leaves with a serrated edge. Each leaf is about that sort of size when it's happy, so I think it looks really at home in a tropical style garden. Now, in the habitat that it's evolved in, I say Mount Ome, that's alluding to the high altitude again, so it's used to those cold temperatures. And it grows in woods and forests, so it's used to deep shade, which means it's growing thick, waxy leaves, and they act as a natural protectant against cold conditions. And we'll go into why that works a little bit later when we go into the deep dive. But if you can find this plant, I think it is a really good plant to add to a tropical style garden. So number three on my list of tropical style plants that are super cold tolerant and will have your garden looking fantastic in winter is a plant known as the Chilean lantern tree. This is Crinodendron Hockearianum. I saw this plant growing at Wakehurst recently. It's a sister garden of Kew, and it just looked incredible. I've seen it growing at Abbotsbury subtropical gardens and in some front gardens around me locally. Now, this plant originates from southern Chile and Argentina. It can tolerate temperatures down to -10 with ease, and it has adapted really, really tough looking, quite small leaves and thick woody stems, and both of those features really help it survive cold conditions. It flowers in summer with these, well, it lives up to its name. They look like lanterns hanging down, bright red lanterns hanging down from what are really quite bare stems. Now, I'd say this plant, yes, it's quite nice and different to have the foliage, but you are primarily growing it for these unusual flowers that just smother the plant when it's in bloom. It's a really nice plant. It will give you structure and foliage in winter, but you get the added bonus of those flowers in summer. So that's the Chilean lantern tree, Crinodendron heucherianum. Number 4 on my list of excellent plants that are evergreen and cold hardy for a tropical style garden or exotic style garden is an aloe. Or at least it used to be an aloe, but they've changed the name. But all I know it is aloe, so that's what we'll stick with here. I'll put the proper name or the new name on screen now. It's Aloe striatula. Now this aloe is incredible. It originates from South Africa on high altitude areas. So again, it's evolved a really thick cuticle that's part of the structure of the leaf that acts as a protectant against cold weather. This aloe, it doesn't grow huge. It gets to maybe waist height, maybe 3 or 4 feet tall, but I think it looks super exotic, and it is tough. Not only does it tolerate cold temperatures, down to about -10 degrees Celsius, it will tolerate a hard pruning too. So it has this tendency to sprawl out from where you've planted it, but you can cut back to bare stems that almost look woody, bare stems, and it will branch out and regrow. And then again, a bonus with this one is it produces flowers that really resemble red hot pokers. Same sort of colours, reds and yellows. And once the flowers are pollinated and they set seed, it almost looks like a bunch of bananas held atop the stem because the seed pods swell in green, stacked on one another. I think it's a super architectural plant, definitely really, really tough. It does need good drainage if you're going to grow it, so make sure that you add that into your planting hole. It grows super well in containers, but definitely try Aloe striatula if you can find it. Okay. Number 5 on my list is a plant that I have mentioned on the channel before because I think it deserves to be grown a lot more. Now it's a bromeliad. Now typically when I talk about bromeliads, I talk about epiphytic bromeliads, a bit like the ones on that shelf behind me, the super tropical, really colourful ones. But there are bromeliads that you can grow that are terrestrial. They grow on the ground and they're really, really cold tolerant. And the one that I'm going to add to this list is Fascicularia bicolor, or the crimson bromeliad. This is a very, very tough bromeliad that's got, again, really tough, waxy leaves. It evolved on the coastal cliffs of Chile. Cliffs of Chile. That's where it evolved. So it's used to salt spray, it's used to cold temperatures, and it is really tough. Now, as this bromeliad is preparing to flower, it earns its name of the crimson bromeliad. The bracts and the leaves inside of the rosette turn bright red, intensely red, and people think that's the flower. It's not. The flowers, there's multiple flowers that appear in the center of the rosette, and they're shades of lilac and purple with tiny yellow stamen inside. It's a really, really good bromeliad to grow. It does colour up best if you can grow it in full sun, because if you think it's evolved on cliffs, it's going to be basking in sunshine, and then you'll get that colour and more flowering. But it will tolerate shade, and it actually grows as a really good evergreen foliage plant in shade and partial shade. But give it as much sun as possible to encourage that colour. So that's the crimson bromeliad, Fascicularia bicolor. Number 6 on my list of plants for a tropical style garden that survive cold conditions is one that is really surprising. You wouldn't think this plant can survive the temperatures it can, or that it would be growing where it naturally grows. So this is a prickly pear, and I've actually got one in a pot here. Now, prickly pears are something that we probably first heard about, all of us, when Baloo the bear in the Jungle Book was singing about his prickly pears. I can't remember the song, which is good, otherwise I might have started singing it. Now, this prickly pear originates from Eastern, Midwestern, and Northern America, and it will even grow in parts of Canada. Now, Canada can get temperatures down to -30 in the areas where this grows. So this plant is incredibly, incredibly cold tolerant. Now, one way it survives cold temperatures is to dehydrate itself. In winter, these lovely, thick, fat, fleshy cactus pads will wrinkle up. It will look like the plant's dying, but it's shedding water because the less water that's in there, the less there is to freeze. And it will flower. I've had this flower in my garden and it's got lovely yellow flowers that come from the tops. It's really eye-catching. They can have quite big spikes. There's one just there. But for some reason, it seems to have just smaller kind of, well, more irritating hairs. You know, the sort of hairs that you get into your finger and you can't find it. A good tip if you do have that, get some strong tape, like packing tape, sellotape, stick it onto your finger and peel it off. So if you grow echiums, they always get stuck in your finger. That's how you get it off. I digress. So a prickly pear that survives cold conditions. Now that one grows not like you'd expect, not like the ones you see in your typical, like stereotypical desert image where there's cactus growing upright with pads on pads on pads. This one is much more horizontal growing. So it will grow spilling over the edge of a flower pot or the edge of a rockery if that's how you choose to plant it. I really enjoy growing this cactus and it's super easy to propagate as well. You just snap off one of the pads, put it into sandy or gritty soil through winter, and come spring there'll be roots and it's the beginnings of a new plant. So that is a Puntia humifusa, a cactus that will survive -30, and it's perfectly happy being covered in snow through the winter months. It's mind-blowing. I love plants. They just are so adaptable. So number 7 on my list, I'm losing count, I think we're on 7, is a plant from high altitudes again, of Yunnan and Sichuan in China. And China's known as the world's garden because it's such a diverse country with so many different habitats that there are just so many incredible plants that have evolved there that are well adapted to climates like ours in the UK. Now this plant is in my top 3 favourite plants in my garden, so it's definitely been featured on the channel before. It's Schefflera delaveyi, or delaveyi, let me know how you say that. It is a large-leaved Schefflera that for me has been the most cold-hardy, cold-resistant Schefflera I've ever grown and the easiest to grow. I think some of us have grown Schefflera taiwaniana and we've had difficulty with it because they have a tendency to look fantastic one day and then really, really bad and sulky the next. But Schefflera delaveyi, I'll cover all bases just to make sure I say it right, for me has been really, really easy to grow and very tough. I'm even growing mine in a pot, which means the roots are more exposed to cold temperatures, more vulnerable to cold temperatures, but even so, it just romps away and looks fantastic. Now it will tolerate temperatures down to about -12 degrees Celsius because, as I say, it's high altitude plant, it's used to those cold temperatures. And not only are the leaves enormous, as they emerge in that new flush of growth in spring, they have this silvery, coppery colour to them. So it makes it a really eye-catching plant. I had a friend in the garden and he saw it and said it looked a bit like a philodendron because the leaves just, not only are they big, I've got a form called the oak-leaved form, which means it's got really serrated leaf edges, which I think just makes it a really attractive plant. So yeah, if you can find one, Schefflera delaveyi. Now, as with all of these plants, the bigger they are, the more cold resistant they're going to be. I would always, even for every plant on this list, I would always say to people, if you've got a very, very young plant, protect it until it's established enough to survive these conditions outside. Because young plants, even in their natural habitat, are likely to get damaged by cold. So if you can find a plant that's big enough, or you can find a small one and protect it this winter, add a Schefflera delaveyi to your garden because it is in my top 3 favourite plants for sure. Number 8 is a climber, and I'm going to add a couple of climbers to this list because I like to add a bit of variety. Now this climber is a hybrid of a plant from Japan and a plant from here, the UK. I call it a climber because it's got some of the climbing tendencies of one of its parents. So it's Fats hedera, Lizii variegata. Fats hedera, that means Fatsia, like Fatsia japonica, and hedera helix. That's our native ivy. So it's a cross between Fatsia and ivy, which is an intergeneric hybrid, which are interesting in themselves, but that's another dig deeper for another video. So what characteristics has this plant got? So from the fatsia side of things, it's got fatsia-like leaves, but more towards the scale of a large-leaved ivy. They're as big and as waxy as like a new leaf on a fatsia. They're really glossy, and in this form, the variegata form, they're variegated. So they've got creamy white patches on, usually around the leaf margins, that make it really, really attractive. And because fatsia and hedera, English ivy, both grow in shade, this plant is very, very shade tolerant. And I love finding a plant that is variegated, evergreen, and shade tolerant, because variegated leaves really act as a way to brighten up shady areas, because that variegation just makes dark areas pop, it just glows. Now, from the ivy side of things, it's developed rather than like a fatsia that just grows as a shrub on a couple of woody stems. This has a much more kind of scrambling stem. It doesn't root in the way that ivy does, so it needs to be tied into a trellis or a support, but it will keep going up. I think it's a really interesting plant to grow. Like I say, it will cover an unsightly surface. So if you've got a wall that you don't like the look of, if you've got, maybe you're trying to hide your compost bin area, you put a trellis alongside it and cover it in Fats hedera, then you're going to have this really tropical looking, unusual, variegated, if you grow the variegata form, screening. I think it's a great plant, and again, easy to propagate. Chop a bit off in early autumn, put it in some well-drained soil. You don't need to heat it, just put it somewhere protected from frost to root the cutting, and then you can multiply that and it acts as a really good screening. So that's Fats hedera, Lizii variegata. And number 9 on my list of cold hardy, evergreen, tropical looking style plants is another climber, and it's the last plant on the list before I get into the science behind why these plants are so well adapted to cold conditions. Now this climber is Clematis europhylla winter beauty, and I added this plant to my garden last year, and I am so happy that I did. The leaves are really, really large for a clematis. They almost look like a viburnum. They've got that same sort of texture, and they're evergreen. They're very resistant to frost. I grow mine on a southwest facing brick wall, so that microclimate there sort of helps it a bit. But this will take down to -10 easily, and a little bit beyond that, I suspect. And it's another plant that originates from mountainous regions in China, so it's used to those high altitude, cold temperature environments. What I love about this plant is about now you start to see hundreds of flower buds emerging from the leaf axils. So not only have I had this lovely, very, very fast growing screen of evergreen leaves through summer and into winter, but it's budding up now and it will produce these creamy, white, very, very waxy, cold resistant flowers. For us last year, it actually started opening its flowers on Christmas Eve, which I thought was really nice. To have a plant producing an abundance of flowers on Christmas Eve when so much of the rest of the garden has been tucked to bed was really, really nice. Now, the way I grow it, and I'm going to share this because I think it's worked really well. The way I grow it is on the same wire as a climbing rose that we've got. And that's because in spring, this clematis needs cutting right back to ground level. I cut it back to about 20 to 30 centimetres above ground level. So I pull all of those evergreen leaves off of the trellis. They've given me something to look at through winter, but it needs cutting back. It will keep growing otherwise, but I want to keep it under control because it is quite a vigorous plant. So then through spring and summer, the rose is exposed. It can breathe. It's not going to be susceptible to all of the problems that roses have. And when that has done its thing and it's flowered, the clematis has quietly been regrowing quite quickly along the trellis, and then that becomes the star of the show now. When the rose is dropping its leaves, it's looking very worse for wear, and it's had its first prune for winter, The clematis, as I say, is budding up and the leaves are looking phenomenal. The autumn rain has really pumped them up. They're looking nice and turgid and big, and that leaf texture I think is eye-catching. So if you can find this plant, add it to your garden. It's Clematis europhylla winter beauty. And it used to be harder to get, but if you search for that online now, I think so many of the popular sellers do them at a really, really good price. So there's a list of some of the plants that are very, very well adapted because of the areas and parts of the world that they originate from to tolerate cold conditions, down to temperatures, some of them down to minus 30 degrees Celsius. A cactus in Canada, blows my mind. So let's have a look at why they are so well adapted to cold conditions in this week's section of digging deeper into the plant science behind the topic we're talking about. So the first method that plants have evolved to tolerate cold conditions is a method of water relocation. Now, if water inside of a cell freezes, it's going to expand and that cell's going to die. The cell wall will rupture, the membrane will rupture, and that causes cell death, and that part of the plant will begin to die. In fact, that's what's happened with this material here. This is a Brassioopsis mitis leaf that was covered in ice earlier this week, and that brown is where cells have frozen solid, the cell wall has completely ruptured, and then the plant starts to die. This is my lovely Impatiens tinctoria. It was in full bloom at the start of the week. It froze, cell walls ruptured, it died. So when a plant moves water from inside the cell to the areas outside the cell and in between other cells, what it's doing is moving it to a lower risk area. So if it freezes in what's called the intercellular space, it's going to be far less damaging than inside of the cells. How smart is that? That plants have sussed out over the years where to move water to. Some plants will even move it out of their leaves completely. They'll allow water to move out through the leaf surface and dehydrate themselves. This cactus, the Opuntia humifusa that was on our list, is one of them. And as I say, the leaves will go really wrinkly and it will look a bit worse for wear in winter, but it means it can sit under snow, it can freeze solid because it's dehydrated its leaves, which means that there is far less chance of freezing inside of the plant cells that's going to cause damage and cell death. Another method of protecting themselves from freezing is by evolving a waxy cuticle. Now, the upper surface of this Fatsia japonica leaf, which again is the parent of one of the plants we spoke about in this video, that's Fats hedera lizii variegata. Fatsia japonica would be one of the parents, and this is a variegated form of that. This really thick, waxy feeling leaf is an evolution feature to protect it against harsh and cold conditions. It acts like a natural winter coat on the upper surface that means that frost and ice formation can't really penetrate inside of the leaf because of this thick, waxy cuticle. So by dehydrating their leaves, plants are naturally increasing the ratio of sugars, amino acids, and proteins to water in their leaves. So dehydrate means that there's more of these sugars, amino acids, and proteins that act as a natural antifreeze, because when there's more of this than water, they're a cryoprotectant. They protect the cell, the plant, from freezing because they lower the temperature. They lower what's called its freezing point, the temperature at which it will freeze. So they're moving water, but what's left acts as a cryoprotectant, as nature's own antifreeze inside of the leaves. So plants like this is Pseudopanax laetus, which is a Scheffler relative. It's a relative of Fatsia japonica. This will do the same thing. It starts to drop leaves down a little bit. You can tell it's moving water around its leaves. It's preparing for cold weather. That one originates from New Zealand, and it's remained evergreen as it's matured because it's now preparing for winter. Winter acclimation is occurring and it's shifting things around, it's lowering its freezing point, which means that I, as a gardener, get to sit back while the plants are doing all the hard work and they're preparing to stay looking lush and green and healthy, even on a frosty morning. Sometimes the actual shape and form of the leaf is a feature that has evolved to protect them from frost too. So narrow leaves is a really good sign that a plant can be quite cold tolerant. And I think in the Acacia dilbata at the start of our list, it has very small leaves, and that really helps it survive these harsh cold conditions. Think of pine trees with their needles. That's a really good evolution tactic to survive cold. And the crinodendron in our list has super small, super tough leaves, again, making it really, really resistant to cold temperatures and frosts. Now, some plants have hairy undersides to their leaves, and it's thought that the hairs can help trap like a layer of warmer air around the leaf, a bit like its own jacket, which I think is a really cool feature. And other plants will angle the leaves to stop frost from developing on the leaf. It will cause any snow and ice to slide off, which again is a really, really smart evolutionary feature to protect plants against cold weather. The final feature that I'll talk about in this digging deeper is lignification. And I've mentioned it a little bit about plants going woody, being more resistant to cold. I think I've mentioned that a lot on the channel. So lignification is the process where a cell turns into a woody tissue, which is primarily to act as a support structure so that plants can grow beyond being a herbaceous small plant into big things like trees and shrubs. But that lignified tissue, the woody tissue on the outside of the plants, is much more resistant to being damaged by ice and freezing. And it protects the xylem tubes, part of the vascular system inside plants, which prevents the flow in the xylem being cut off, which is called embolism. So that woody tissue is going to protect it as well. So shrubs like the pseudopanax I've just shown you, the fatsia, once they've gone woody, it's just another tactic to help them be protected from freezing temperatures. So plants can dehydrate themselves. They can move water from inside the cells to outside the cells, but keep it inside the leaves. They can create their own natural antifreeze, and wood and leaf features help protect the plant just in the shape and size and structure of the thing. I think it's incredible. And hopefully the next time you walk out in the garden and there's a frosty morning and you see some plants looking really, really sorry for themselves, and you see others just shrugging it off, hopefully you'll have more insight into what's going on. I hope you've enjoyed this week's digging deeper, an exploration into plant science. I really have, and it's quite perfectly timed because parts of my garden are looking very sad this week. The bananas are looking brown and mushy, and so many of the herbaceous annual plants that we grow are just looking sad. But the shrubs, especially as they've matured, are looking fantastic, and now I know what's going on. Thank you so much for watching, for supporting this channel. Feel free to check out our blog and some of the plant profiles on there, where you can find more information about most of the plants that I speak about on the YouTube channel. And I just really appreciate your support. I'll actually say as well that I've set up a Buy Me a Coffee page. So if you want to support this channel with a small donation, either a one-off donation or a monthly donation, it would be massively appreciated. There's a link in the description of this video, and a link over on our website as well. And that support just means that I can keep producing these videos and putting the time into them. I do enjoy doing it, but it does take quite a bit of time. So any support, whether it's hitting the subscribe button, visiting our website, or clicking the support Buy Me a Coffee link, then it's all massively appreciated. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you watching this all the way till the end, and I will see you in the next one.